So I'm excited about this next panel because we've got 4 individuals who have taken very different approaches to launching tokens. And most of the people in this room are probably familiar with what's been going on in token sales in the past 12 months. There's been over, I think, 350 million raised in token sales, and that's significantly more than the actual venture capital that's been raised in this space over that same time period. So we've got 4 guys that have all taken different approaches, and I think we're still at a point in this industry where it's very early, there's no clear best practices, and there's a lot to learn. And I think we can all kind of learn a lot from these guys who have actually done it or are doing it. So why don't we start, guys, by you guys briefly talking about your approach to launching a token and actually why you used a token. And why don't we start with Joey, because Joey's kind of our resident veteran on the panel, launching Augur about 2 years ago and raising 5 million in that token sale, which, by the way, now 5 million is actually a very small round in the token space. So, Joey?
Yeah, so basically with Augur, the idea was we wanted to build a decentralized platform for prediction markets. The idea being you can basically speculate on derivatives on anything. And so the token thing, at the time, for one, it was a bear market. Probably much easier to raise money from VCs than doing a token sale at that time. And so for us, the token was something that was actually really needed. So to explain why it was needed, in Augur there's 2 parts. One part is where you're actually trading. That's done in any cryptocurrency like Ether or Bitcoin. And then the other half is basically reporting. So how do you get the real world information into the blockchain? Basically, who won the presidency? What did Apple's share price close at on Friday? Things like that. And for that, we needed this distributed Oracle system. And so the idea behind rep is it essentially serves as a bond. And what that means is you post rep, and if you report inaccurately, you lose it. So you're losing something of value. And then the other part of it is, in exchange for reporting, you get a portion of the trading fees that go through the system. And the main reason for why we needed something like rep instead of just using Ether for this part is basically none of the game theory or economic incentives work unless the token is used just for reporting on Augur, which Ethereum obviously wouldn't be once proof of stake comes out. And then also there's another benefit to having a token, which is you can fork the underlying application, in this case Augur. It can fork into 2 sets where one set says Trump won, one set says he didn't, without forking Ethereum itself. And as we've seen with the DAO, forking Ethereum itself is very problematic and very expensive. And you don't want Ethereum to fork every time any application on top of it disagrees about something. And so basically that kind of led us to, we had this asset called rep, we needed to distribute it somehow. What's the best way to do that? And the simplest way that made sense for us was just do a simple auction. So basically what we did is we said, okay, well, we're gonna make 11 million of it. We'll keep 20% for the 16 advisors and founders, and then 4% for the foundation itself, and sold the other 80%. And the way we did it is we basically just said, send your Ether or Bitcoin to an address, and we will basically give you proportionally how much you sent, whatever balance there is of the rep. So if there were $5 million raised and you sent us 5 million, you would get all of it. And so what ended up happening is about 3,000 people participated in that. And then in 2016, we ended up distributing the rep, so it's like tradable now. And then the idea is to launch this year with a first version of actual live Augur where people are making markets and reporting on it.
So I'm curious, did you actually talk to venture capitalists about funding a more traditional way?
So before we realized how the system was going to work, we talked to some VCs. But then as we kept speccing out the system, we realized that, well, if we went the VC funding route, we'd be giving up consensus in our system. So for crypto economic systems, there's this idea of consensus mechanisms. And it's really only decentralized or secure, in my opinion, if one person holds the majority of the consensus, it's not decentralized. So if we were to sell to VCs, sure, the seed round, it would still be fairly decentralized. But by the time you get to Series B, Series C, VCs are going to own, around half the company, which means they can easily just attack the whole thing. So you really need a kind of a more distributed ownership, which is why we went with the crowd sale route.
Got it. And why don't we next go to Richard, who kind of took a different approach, which was to raise traditional venture capital and then launch a token that actually served primarily as not a funding mechanism, but actually a product enhancement, if you will. So why don't you describe Numeraire and your project broadly?
Yeah. Numeraire is like, we give away stock market data to data scientists that model it with machine learning and then submit predictions back to our fund. We have over 16,000 data scientists connected to the platform, and that's over 100 times more than they are at any other hedge fund. So it's sort of like this interesting thing: can you do like a distributed hedge fund where the modeling is happening outside of the company by anonymous people? So on day one, we started paying people in Bitcoin to facilitate this, but then recently we decided to create our own cryptocurrency, which is very much inspired by Rep, actually. Joey helped on it even, and the idea is if you're submitting predictions and you want to get someone to really submit really good predictions, it really helps if they have an economic incentive. And so just like if you're staking your Rep, you're doing the same thing with Numeraire, where you're staking it on your predictions, and if your predictions are right, you make money, and if they're wrong, then you lose everything. So it has this very strong economic incentive. And we're not doing a crowd sale. We're just giving it away to the data scientists. So we already have about 16,000 people who hold Numeraire. But we decided to raise VC in a normal way because we are actually a real hedge fund that's trading equities. So we can't be fully decentralized because you have to put the hedge fund money somewhere, and we're not trading crypto assets.
Got it. So for you, you're using a token essentially to create stronger network effects on your product. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, we want everyone to be aligned, and if everyone holds the same thing, kind of a magical alignment happens, and that's what's happened in this whole space, I think. You put a few $100s into a crowd sale, and you have the kind of psychological connection with it that you suddenly behave in a way that supports the project. And we had a lot of adversarial users who just wanted to kind of game the system and win Bitcoin. And we learned from them, but we wanted to make it be, okay, well, what if everyone's on this, has the same thing and is all incentivized to make it work?
Got it. So Andy, why don't we shift to you and the Maker project, which I personally think is one of the most kind of underrated projects in the space. And you guys took a very, I would say, non-traditional way of launching a token, which was you didn't do a big crowd sale, and it was kind of a much more of under the radar kind of grassroots effort. So talk a little bit about how you guys launched the Maker token and also why.
So Maker is a stablecoin system that seeks to create a token called DAI, which is stable with respect to national currencies over over short and medium time increments. And in order for the system to work, there is a second token called Maker, or MKR. And the Maker holders, much like Rep, have a responsibility. When they hold the token, they're responsible for managing the risk profile of the system and making decisions about how it should be run. So holding Maker is a huge responsibility. You really, really need to be active. You need to be engaged. You can't just be sort of like a speculator who has no interest in the underlying technology. And so our founder, Rune, when he first came up with this idea, he realized early on that the entire value of the system, of the Maker system, is completely dependent on the intelligence of the maker holders. Like, it's almost a direct mapping. So he really wanted to make sure that the right people were attracted to the project. And essentially what he did is he set up a series of cognitive filters by putting the information out there, but not hyping it, not putting it in your face. So that way people who were generally interested in technology, you know, blockchain nerd type people, would read the white paper, assess the design and the strengths of the design for themselves, and then make a decision about whether or not to buy. And that's actually how I first found it. When I first found out about Ethereum, I read the Maker white paper that same week, and I was instantly hooked for a few different reasons. Most importantly, a lot of interesting use cases in blockchains require some sort of stable unit of account. So this lack of hype was an intentional strategy that we have kept up essentially to this day to make sure that the people that buy the Maker token are the right people, people that are in it for the long haul and want to be partners in this project.
Yeah, so I think these three kind of examples of tokens are what I call a work token, which is a token that you need to contribute work to this crypto economic system that actually allows the whole system to work properly. And so I think, you know, what you guys have highlighted is that it's actually important who is holding the tokens. And in your case in particular, right, you call your token holders governors. And why don't you talk a little bit just about what actually the role is of the governors in this whole system to make it work properly?
Sure, yeah. So without getting too much into the details, because we could really get lost in the weeds there, the governors of the system, they have to make two important decisions. The first one is they have to decide who is going to be providing Oracle data, so outside information, much like rep. In fact, it could be a decentralized system like rep that the maker holders choose, but in any case, somebody is going to have to be providing outside information about the price of assets to the maker system in order for it to autonomously work from that point forward. And the second thing that they have to choose is they have to choose what types of assets back DAI. So DAI, every single DAI coin is backed in excess by a collateral asset. So if you have, for instance, $1 worth of DAI, then it's backed by, hypothetically, it would be backed by $2 worth of ETH. So ETH is something that obviously we all have a lot of confidence in. That's what we're doing here in this room together. But that's not the only type of asset that there is, right? There's a whole pantheon of assets that we all have to make decisions about as investors and particularly as maker governors. So what the maker holders have to do is they have to coordinate on not only what types of assets are acceptable to back DAI, but the size of the profile, which assets constitute what percentage of the profile, and most importantly, what assets will not experience a black swan event. Because the maker holders, they receive fees from the system, they receive profits from the system, but if they choose the wrong asset that suddenly overnight goes to zero in a black swan type event, they suffer because maker tokens are inflated to cover the DAI that was issued against this now worthless asset. So they very much have skin in the game when they make these decisions about what type of assets are acceptable as collateral.
And just lastly on kind of the governors is like the governors are actually actively participating in like team meetings and stuff like that. So you guys have been and I think, you know, one thing that's interesting about all these projects is they're very open projects that anyone can participate in, and that's kind of the nature of open source. Yeah. So
yeah, the DAI Foundation, which is the nonprofit that has been tasked with developing the Maker platform, is originally started as sort of just a group of people who are coming together over TeamSpeak, if anybody knows that old school platform, to just talk and kind of figure out how to develop this product in an open source way. And so we were necessarily transparent due to the fact that we were coordinating as strangers over the internet, and we haven't really lost that, that sense of transparency. And in fact, we're trying to kind of be an example for other projects in the space in terms of being transparent, being open, actively engaging the community, syncing up as often as possible with these development updates, and just generally speaking, making the development process as community-oriented as possible. And we think that that sort of feeds back into the system because you get a chance to meet these smart people, and like attracts like. So these smart people are attracting more smart people, and it's a very grassroots sort of strategy.
Got it. So why don't we move next to Ankur, who was deeply involved in the Brave Attention token, which is the one token of the panelists that isn't launched yet, but you guys are launching next week. So why don't you briefly describe kind of your approach to launching the token and also why you guys went with a token?
Sure. So I'll first start like what Brave or BAT is. So I'm an advisor at BAT, so so my involvement is like mostly in advising, how what to do with the token sale. So what BAT is doing is they're building a decentralized ad network. And in order to build a network on the internet, you need to find a way to bootstrap it. And there's always a chicken and egg problem on how you get advertisers, how you get users. So BAT is using the token mechanism to do that. So specifically, BAT has a user growth pool of 300 million tokens, so which is used to incentivize users to download the browser. And on the publisher side, BAT is removing the middleman. So instead of getting 55% or like 40% when you use Google or Facebook, you get like 70 to 80%. So that incentivizes the publisher to be on the network. And now when you have users and publishers on the network, then advertisers will come. And if you look at the current state of the Brave browser, so Brave browser already has like more than 1 million downloads or users, and more than 150 publishers are already part of the Brave ecosystem. So compared to most of the projects out there, Brave is different. That Brave already has users and publishers on the platform. And yeah, so the approach that we are taking is being as transparent as possible. Right from the first day when when Brendan and I were talking about doing a token sale, the approach has been like sharing information on a regular basis and being fair to everyone so that incentives of everyone in the ecosystem are aligned.
Got it. So what are some things that you guys have learned, going through the process of launching a token? I think, as I said, it's clear that there's like no best practices, and I think there's still very much learning to be done. So I guess one question would be, what's a mistake that either you've made or you've seen others make that you think is like a problem? Anyone?
Yeah, I can start. One thing I've seen is like many of the projects out there have like more advisors than developers, right? You will see like people with like 3 rows of advisors and like 1 row of developer. That to me is really surprising. So we dug into it and see what was happening, and we noticed that like many of these like people who are really popular in the Ethereum community reach out to these projects like inexperienced developers and telling them, hey, we'll be your advisor, and in return they ask for 2 to 4% of tokens. And the sad thing is like they have like different packages. They're like, hey, if you put my picture for like 4 days before and after the crowd sale, we take this percent. And many of these developers think that, hey, this will help them build credibility and raise more money, and they fall for it, so which is really sad. And when in fact they should be focusing on building a good product. So that's something that I've seen that could be improved in the space. And one more thing that I have seen is reservation contracts. So like, many of the token sales that are happening, they say they have like X tokens available for sale, when in fact only, like some part of the tokens are like, reserved for people in a crowd sale. So they are not being really open about it. Yeah.
Anyone else have anything they want to mention?
So I think continuous distribution of application tokens is somewhat underrated, and by that I mean very underrated, in Ethereum and other protocols like it.
Just to be clear, what we're talking about with continuous distribution is basically when you launch a token, you could do it. You could sell a fixed amount, and that's it. And in the case of Augur, that was the case, right, Joey? And then another approach would be to raise an amount, which is a portion of what you're selling to the crowd, and then distribute the rest on an ongoing basis.
Exactly. So to this day, or what I should say is, initially 1 million maker tokens were created, and about half of them were sold before the DAI Foundation was created, or before the DAI Foundation creation process got underway. And now at this point, we have a large collection of maker tokens that is specifically set aside for the development of the platform. And in an effort to get Maker into the hands of the right people, we sell a fixed amount every week. And I think that model is something that a lot of other projects could maybe think about doing, because it sort of necessarily makes the project a little bit more grassroots, because there's always an opportunity to get in rather than just a one and done, oh, I missed it, my internet connection went out or something. It's just a lot easier to distribute the token, especially with these tokens like BAT that are like more transactional in nature, where you're using it to interact with the system and you want to have a wide distribution. I think that continuous distribution is something that these like more projects could do to think about.
And Ankur, that is your approach to BAT, right? Is you guys are selling a fixed amount initially, but also reserving a pool for users that you're giving on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, that's right. Out of 1.5 billion tokens, 1 billion are up for sale initially, and then 300 million tokens are part of what we are calling a user growth pool. So when a user downloads the browser, they get some tokens. So we're incentivizing the users to download the app and grow the ecosystem.
One thing I've learned is these markets are very inefficient. So what I mean by that is, if you create a token and you're trying to like maximize the value you can get, one very simple way to do that is create more tokens. So when we created Augur, we were like, oh, 11 million seems like a good number, just because like it's one above 10. But really, like, I think like the price of like Augur would be like way higher if we had done like 200 million tokens or like 2 billion tokens, just because these markets are so dang inefficient that people don't even like realize it. And then Ankur's point about the advising thing is super good. Basically, if someone is asking to advise your company, you do not want them to be an advisor. So basically, like companies I advise have like said like, hey, this person asked to be an advisor, and I'm like, no, don't do that, because if they're having to ask, they're probably not someone you should be having an advisor company.
Got it.
Yeah, I think I agree with especially the supply thing, because we were thinking about, oh, should we have, how many tokens should we have, and what would the effect on the price be? But then you realize it really shouldn't matter, and so have fewer, right? Because you want to you always want to make something that's long term, and all these considerations of what actually is the intended consequence of you having a token, aside from raising money. You need to consider, and just like with you guys, like we're giving the numeraire tokens to our data scientists, and it's for them, and only they can use them or understand them really. And when we're designing it, we're thinking, okay, yeah, but there's going to be this whole speculator class that's going to want to buy it, and we've just like tried to make it in such a way that, same with continuous distribution, we only gave away 1 million. There'll only ever be 21 million. And we're going to keep giving them out to data scientists for doing machine learning. Like, there's no other way. We're never selling them. So there's all these things where you want to be careful to get the right outcome. And ironically, the smarter you are, the more speculators are attracted to it. So it's like, it's complicated.
So do you guys have a view on doing a token sale pre-product? Because I think one thing I've noticed, I mentioned like over 350 million in the past 12 months has been raised in token sales, and I think of those projects, it's like something like 30 projects, 35 projects. There's not one actual live product, and so we're seeing this. The crowd is funding these projects that are basically, the crowd is investing in a website. And so I don't know, but in the case of like Joey, you guys actually used, you were one example of someone that I think is an interesting project that actually used, you know, a token sale as a crowdfunding mechanism. So do you guys have views on that?
Yeah. Basically, I think you should have like an MVP or a prototype that like is fairly functional. That's not like just a UI that like looks pretty. And once you have that point, then I think it's perfectly fine to raise money. That's how most VC works as well. With a few rare exceptions, if you show up to a VC with a white paper and that's it, they're going to kind of laugh you out the door. And in the current crowdfunding space, that's not necessarily true, but I think it should be.
So, like, you know, one thing I would like to clarify is like Brave not only does have a product, but they also have users, right? So right now it's integrated with Bitcoin, but the plan is to, you know, I think Brendan can talk more about it, to integrate with Ethereum, and like some components of the ledger are already there. So I think things should be happening soon for Brave.
I think it's really awesome to have things be instantly funded and financialized, but I think the investors should be brighter about it.
Yeah.
I think it's a very fine line that you walk when you do things like this, but I don't think it's unheard of, and I don't think it's impossible to make it work. Maker released a token before having a product, and I think that part of the reason that we did that was to start building the community very early on because it's so essential. So I think a lot of it has to do with what you need from your token holders. If you need it to be a wide class of people from all aspects of society, then it makes sense to try and start distributing it as soon as you can and trying to start distributing it as widely as you can. If you need a very certain specific type of professional, like with Numerai, it makes sense to find those people long before you ever even think about creating a token. And if it's something in the middle where you could take, where anybody can sort of train themselves to do what the token is required, like Maker, then I think that it makes sense to sort of distribute as you find the people that are interested in the product.
Got it. So we've got about 2 minutes left. I'm curious to hear from you guys if you have any kind of predictions or expectations about how the next few years will play out in terms of the funding kind of environment for token sales, because it's quite crazy right now, and I think, you know, agree with Richard. It's good in a lot of ways, but it, you know, to some could seem overhyped in a lot of ways too. So any thoughts there?
I think that, so we've been living in a financialized capitalist system for, you know, something like at least 100 years now, and I think that venture capitalists have, in that time, have learned probably a lot about what makes a good idea worth investing in, and I think it's now time for the public to learn the same thing. So these, like,
By the hard way.
The hard way, yeah, yeah. And I think that VC learned it the hard way too. So I think that I'm actually very optimistic about all of this bonanza of tokens, because I think that we're going to see sort of an intelligence expansion of just the general public that is interested in blockchains, because they're all going to learn, probably the hard way, what makes a good idea worth investing in.
Cool. So we've got 1 minute. Want to open it up to questions if anyone has any. And we don't have mics, so if you have a question for any of these guys, just quickly raise your hand.
Just very quickly, what in your opinion is the best distribution channels and marketing campaigns for Facebook campaign or going for Reddit?
So the question was, what are the best marketing channels? My view, I'm very skeptical on projects that are marketing aggressively in the early stage. To me, that's actually a bad heuristic. So if you're seeing, you know, a project that has a Twitter account that has, you know, hundreds of retweets, they created a bot to do that. And so to me, it's more like Reddit, following what's going on in Reddit, and then actually getting to know projects by like reaching out to the founders or getting in their Slacks or things like that. So I don't really. That's my view. I don't know.
I think Reddit is probably the strongest signal in terms of meaningful discussion. I don't know if it's the best place for meaningful discussion, but that's probably the best place to start if you want to introduce a new idea to the community.
Cool. Well, thanks, guys. That was a fun conversation. Yep.